All right, so today we're going to do the rest of the Old Testament, which is about 1,000 years. You guys ready for 1,000 years of history? Okay, so I broke it up into 4 sections. It'll be super easy. It's not going to take very long, okay? So it will not take 1,000 years. Let's time me, okay? Right now it is 11 o'clock. So look, the big hand is on the 12. Give me 10 minutes to tell this story. Think I can do it in 10 minutes? Probably not, but I'm going to try, okay? So when the big hand is on the 2, I have to stop. Okay, you guys ready? Here we go. All right, so the people of God are hanging out in the wilderness, and where does God live? What? And where's God at? Molly? Not in the heavens. They can actually see him. Fiona, where's God at? The what? We did. He has a house that we talked about last week. Elise? What? Not the earth. Joseph? Yes, but where's the Ark of the Covenant at, Abby? In the tent of what? What's the tent called? Fiona? Tabernacle. So God is in the tabernacle, and all the Israelites are around him. And anytime the cloud would move, or the fire would move, they would follow. And they were going to what country? Canaan. Canaan was also called the Promised Land. So God is going to send his people into the Promised Land because that's the land that God promised. It goes back to the covenant. God promised to Abraham, you'll have a lot of kids. You're going to show the world what I'm like. I'm going to be with you, and I'm going to give you a land so that you can call your own. A land. So they got to go to the Promised Land. And on the way there, anytime the cloud lifted, they followed God. Anytime the cloud didn't lift, they stayed put. So they had to kind of obey. But when the people of Israel got closer to Canaan, or the Promised Land, they would not enter the land because they were afraid. What? Oh, sorry, I thought I underlined it. Were afraid. They were afraid. So because they thought they were like giants, and they were like, we can't do it. We're puny. But God had just rescued them from Egypt, right? He took care of the most powerful person in the world than the Egyptians. And they're like, oh, these guys are huge. We can't do anything. So then they got punished. Whoops, sorry, I messed up. They got punished, and they had to wander for 40 years. And the reason why it was 40 years is because all the people who said, no, we can't go in, God was waiting for them all to die. And then their kids would then be the ones to enter the Promised Land. So, at the end, right before they entered the Promised Land, before Moses passed away or died, he told his people, God's people, to love who with all their what and what and what? So raise your hands. To love what? Grady? To love the Lord what? Your God with all what? Your heart, soul, and so that means love God with everything. And then Moses tells his people, be strong and courageous, which is the opposite of fear. Yeah. Why is he telling them this, Joseph? What happened 40 years before this? Yeah. Do not be afraid or terrified because of them. For who goes with you? God does. He won't leave you or leave you alone to die. He's going to be, because there's a tabernacle. God is with them. So Moses passes away. The torch of leadership gets passed to a guy named Joshua. And Joshua takes the people, and they go into the land of Canaan, and they kick out all the bad. There's lots of stories about this, but we're just going to run through them. We're just going to run through the whole thing. He kicks out a bunch of people, and then they divide up the land into 12 states, or 12, it's called tribes. And guess where the 12 come from? Whose kids are... Not Joseph's kids. Jacob's kids. So they divide them into 12. So their tribe would be called, so the oldest was Reuben. So Reuben has a section of the land that he owns. And another one is Simeon and Judah and Issachar and Naphtali. And Joseph gets split up between his two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. That sound good? Okay. So, things are going good, but then the Israelites don't listen, and they eventually start worshiping the false gods of the people in the land. The job was to drive out everybody in the promised land, so it would just be who in there? Just be God's people, right? Just be God's presence there. But they said, nah, we'd rather go our own way, and we'd rather do everything as we saw fit. Doesn't that sound like the beginning? Remember in the beginning, God created humans, and humans said, thanks for creating this for us. We're going to go do it ourselves. This sounds like the same story over and over and over again. Yes, Molly. I only have 5 more minutes. Yes. Joseph?
Question.
Yes.
So, where is that today?
What?
That place where...
The Promised Land?
Yeah.
It's where is the country of Israel and Palestine is right now. It's that's that place. Yes, Grady.
How old was Moses?
Moses was about 120 years old when he died. That is pretty old. Okay. So, let me know. So now we're in Judges. So what God did was he used a group of people called judges to help save his people, to wake them up. But they didn't do a very good job. They were on a sin cycle. You see this? They were on a sin cycle. Thank you, Mahogany. So look at the top of the circle. They do really good. Now put your own name in here, right? You do really good. And then you do something bad. And what happens when you do something bad? You get punished, right? And then when you get punished, what do? Help, I want to get out of punishment. And then God sends them a deliverer or a judge, and the judge saves them. And then Israel does? Good. It's totally like your life, isn't it? You listen to your parents, and then you don't. Then you get punished. Then you're like, please let me out. And they say, okay, we'll save you. And then you're saved, and then you go back to doing good again. And then 2 minutes later, you do something bad again, and the cycle goes all around, right? So Israel did this as a country. They would worship false gods, idols, and then God would say, oh, you're doing something bad. So he'd send the Ammonites or some foreign people to come in and take them out and make them slaves again. And then Israel would go, whoa, we messed up, oops. And God would send them a military judge to save them, and they would save them. And then they're like, yay, we're going to be good for a while. And then they went bad. So they did this about 16, 17 times. I mean, they kept doing this. This is why they weren't getting better. They were getting worse. And the end of the book of Judges, I don't recommend you guys reading it until you're probably in 8th grade. Because there's some really gross, at the end of the book of Judges, God's people don't look anything like God's people. They look the opposite of God's people. So the Israelites around say, well, we're not doing very good, so give us a king. And we want a king because we want to be what? Like all the other nations. So then they gave him a king called Saul. And Saul was really big. I mean, he stood so tall, they were like, ooh, he looks like a king. But Saul did a horrible job. The next king was a guy named David, and he was fine, and God said, I want him to be the one to lead you guys. And David did a fantastic job with some things. Then he promised to David that his kingship, his kids, one of his kids, would rule on the throne forever. Guess why Jesus is called the son of David? He's called that's why he was born in David's hometown, Bethlehem. Because, Luke is like, whoa. What?
So he said one of your sons would be on the throne forever.
Right, and who's that?
Jesus.
And he is on the throne forever, isn't he? So it's almost like God's promises actually come true. Yeah, God's serious when he does this stuff. So David's son, so it was Saul, then David, then Solomon. And Solomon asked God for wisdom so he could rule wisely. All the nations came to Solomon because he was so wise. And then Solomon said, the tent we're not moving around anymore. Let's build a permanent house for God, and that's called the temple, all right? And then in the temple, that's where God's presence was. After Solomon died, his son, there was a civil war, and Israel was split in two, north versus south. Sounds like America's history, doesn't it? The north was called Israel, the south was called Judah, or the Jews. Okay? And so for many years, probably about 180, maybe 200 and some odd years, he was trying to get their attention, and the people were like, nah, we'd rather go our own way. Sound like an ever-ending story? It's like Israel was not doing a good job at all. So God sent them into exile, which means another country came in and took them over. And this is when Jesus comes to life. Is who's in charge of the Israelite people when Jesus comes on the scene? Hold on. I asked a question. Who came and who was in charge of Israel when Jesus came on the scene? Luke? Romans. The Roman government was in charge. And guess who was not in charge? God's people. Israel was not in charge of their own country. Do they like that, or did they not like that? Oh, they didn't like that. Oh, they cared. Lucas. Oh, they cared. Then God sent prophets or messengers. And the messengers were like, hey, wake up! Don't you realize you're doing a bad job, Charlie? Wake up, Eli! Why are you sleeping? You're doing a horrible job! Tyler, get that out of your mouth! Okay? But the prophets were trying to get people's attention. So they did really weird things like lay on their side and cook their meal over their poop. Some of them would go tell a country that they were sinning, and so they had to go do that. Sometimes a prophet would go tell a king that they were doing a bad job. Is that a good idea or a bad idea? Kings is not like a president. A king can just kill you on the spot if they didn't like you. So is being a prophet dangerous or easy? Very dangerous. Because you're not only getting in trouble from your enemies, but you're also getting in trouble from your own side. So your enemies don't like you and your friends don't like you. Prophets get squeezed like an Oreo cookie in the middle. Although they're really good. They're really good. These prophets also told people about a coming king. And that person's name was going to be a Messiah right there. So for when Jesus comes on the scene, in about 4 BC is when Jesus was born. The people of his day were wondering, when is the Messiah going to come? Where is this Savior that's going to save us from the bad Romans? And what was this guy's name? Well, that's horrible.
You did it the wrong way.
I did it the wrong way. Yeah, Jesus was going to be it. But people of those days didn't know it was going to be Jesus. They thought it would be anybody that would be saving the people, that would get military soldiers together. They'd get swords and let's go take out the Romans. Those were called zealots, or we call them terrorists today. Okay? They thought that it would take a terrorist movement to take out the Romans so that we could get our country back. Is that what Jesus did? No. He did something a little different, didn't he? So the Messiah was going to be a descendant of David. He'd be born in Bethlehem, messenger from the wilderness. He'd bring good news. He wouldn't do anything wrong. He'd be beaten, whipped, and wounded. Oh, that happened, right? He would lay the punishment and guilt for all of our sins on him. He'd be silent. His hands and feet would be pierced. Yep, that hurt. He would be killed like a criminal. Yep, that happened. He'll be buried in a what? Rich man's tomb. And because of him, many people would be made right with God. That was the prophets predicted who? Predicted Jesus. There you go. Oh, it only took me 15. Ooh, that was close. I was going fast. All right. That's the story. Sounds good, huh? What is it? Gave them judges to save them. Didn't work. Gave them kings to save them. Didn't work. Sent them prophets to get their attention. Didn't work. And then he sent them Jesus. And we'll learn that as we go here. How did the Jesus story work out? Did they listen to him? Nope, they killed him. And Jesus is all of these three things. He's a judge, he's a king, and he's a prophet. Isn't that cool? So Jesus is known as the prophet, priest, and king.